Welcome to Short Story Horror Channel, where we share a wide range of strange to bone-shivering stories. New here? Hit that subscribe button and never miss a nightmarish update. Now dim the lights and get ready for a thrilling ride into the unknown. Story 1. Hi, my name is Anna. I live in the LA area with my husband and 2 children. The story I'm going to share with you is about a chilling experience I had when I was once homeless. To be honest, growing up, my life was quite hard. My mom raised me on her own after my parents' divorce 11 years ago. We lived in a cramped one-bedroom apartment in LA, and my mom worked as a housemaid to pay the bills. When I turned 18, I finished high school and decided not to go to college so I could find a job to help my mom with the bills. Finding a job was hard, and I wasn't able to get one that first year. Eventually, my mom got another job as a dancer at a nightclub. She was rarely around, but I managed to keep myself busy at home and stay out of trouble. On weekends, my mom would sometimes bring strangers home, so I would end up locking myself in my room with my music on to drown out the sounds from the living room. One weekend, I was in the shower while she brought a man home. I got out of the shower and saw everything. I quickly rushed into my room, pretending I didn't see anything. My mom later asked me if I saw anything, and I just told her I didn't because I closed my eyes. That's how life was when I was living with my mom in our apartment. On weekends, if I didn't end up going out at night, I'd just stay in my room, trying to escape the toxic environment around me. When I was 22 years old, I finally landed my first job as a waitress at a small diner in town. For the first time, I could help my mom with the bills. After a couple of months of saving up, we were able to move into a 900-square-foot 2-bedroom house. It was small, but for the 2 of us, it was perfect. Just as things were looking good, tragedy struck. Within months of moving into our new home, my mom got into a car accident on her way home from work and passed away. I was devastated, scared, sad, and worried about facing the world alone. With the little savings I had, I managed to cover my mom's funeral expenses, but within months, my rent and bills became too much. I was struggling to make my car payment, and eventually it got repossessed. I started falling behind on rent payments, and I was soon evicted. I was able to hold on to my job for some time while being homeless, but eventually it became too hard and I had to quit. Being alone on the street with nothing, I fell into a darkness I could never have imagined. Being homeless for the first year was a nightmare. Life out there was dangerous, especially for a young woman. I witnessed horrors I'll never forget. People being robbed, beaten, raped, and even killed. Women were especially vulnerable, and I lived every night in fear. Shelters offered little help as their rules were strict and draining, so I wandered the streets, trying to make friends with other homeless people for protection. I made a few homeless friends, but they always came and went. No one was really there to stay. I had a few relationships as a homeless person, but it was tough, and they never worked out. One stormy night, rain poured down, and my tent was leaking from the tape I used to seal it. The inside of my tent got soaked quickly, so I put a trash bag over myself, packed up the few things I owned, and ran out to find another shelter. I saw a man, probably in his mid-30s, in his car parked by the side of the road. He looked at me while I walked past and eventually yelled out, "There's an abandoned house a few blocks away if you need a place to get away from the rain." I ignored him, but soon I got desperate and headed in that direction to see if I could find that abandoned house. When I got there, I saw a rundown house. The windows were shattered and the walls were covered in graffiti. Exhausted and wet, I decided to take my chances and enter the house. I tried to make some noise to see if I heard any response, but it was dead quiet. I found a room upstairs and spent the night curled up in a corner with some dirty old rags I found around the house. I was hungry and my stomach was growling nonstop. Sleeping was my only way to forget about my hunger. That night I had a vivid, chilling dream. In it, the sound of drunken laughter echoed through the house. Men's voices, deep and menacing, broke the silence, accompanied by the gut-wrenching cries of a woman. My heart pounded as I imagined the scene unfolding downstairs. Suddenly, footsteps thundered up the stairs, and a woman burst into the room where I was hiding. Her tear-streaked face was smeared with ruined makeup, and her hair was tangled and messy. She wore a torn knitted sweater dress, clutching her side as if she was injured. She locked eyes with me, her voice trembling as she begged me to hide. "Run! "Get into the attic," she whispered urgently, her voice cracking. "They'll find you. Please hide now." She pointed to the closet, her eyes filled with fear. Before I could respond, she shoved me toward the closet, pleading for me to go up to the attic. Then she vanished like smoke dissipating into the air. I woke to the sound of men talking outside. My heart started pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to do. I got up and looked out the window. It was the same car I had seen earlier. Out came 4 men from the car. My blood ran cold, and I didn't know where to hide. I looked around and saw a closet, so I opened it and got inside. It was dark, so I tried to see as much as I could from the moonlight shining from outside. I then remembered my dream about the attic, so I reached up, and to my surprise, there was a latch. I stopped for a couple of seconds and thought of the dream I had. Hair stood up all over my body. I heard the men coming in, so I snapped out of it and tried to open the attic. My fingers trembled as I pushed open the attic hatch. The creaking sound felt noisy, but I climbed in, pulling the hatch shut behind me. The attic was cramped and dusty, filled with cobwebs and the stale smell of decay. From above I could hear them, footsteps, laughter, the clinking of bottles. The men spoke in low voices and I caught snippets of their conversations. One of the men said, "She's probably in here somewhere." My stomach churned as everything started to make sense. I was lied to. It was a trap. I should have never come here. I stayed motionless, every creak of the floorboards below making my breath hitch. The men looked in every room searching for me. Finally, after what felt like hours, they left. I lay in the attic, frightened, until dawn broke, and the house fell silent. I waited just to be sure they were absolutely gone. Climbing down from the attic, my legs were weak, but my instincts screamed at me to run. As I stumbled out into the pale morning light, I couldn't shake the feeling that the woman in my dream had saved me. Was she a spirit? A victim who met her end in that house? Her warning had spared me from a fate I dared not imagine. Even now, the memory of her haunted eyes stays with me. She was more than a dream. She was a savior. Although I am out of the streets and now have a loving husband and beautiful children, I'll never forget the night she gave me the strength to survive when I was at my lowest. Story 2. My name is Justin. I'm 28 years old and I live in San Francisco. When I graduated from high school, 3 of my friends and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in San Francisco. We all wanted to experience living on our own in the big city while making sure it was affordable. I was already working at a coffee shop when we moved in together. However, after a few months, the job wasn't paying enough, so I quit and got a job as a street cleaner instead. The pay was decent and helped cover my share without tapping into my savings account. Since I was new to the job, I got stuck with odd hours, often pulling night shifts once or twice a week. I didn't mind though. The city was much quieter at night, and the cool air made the work refreshing. One night, while sweeping the sidewalk, a homeless woman approached me. Her clothes were tattered and her eyes were desperate. There was something about her that gave me chills. It was like she didn't have any life left in her. She was pale, skinny, and moved slowly. In my head, I thought, great, another homeless person asking for money. She slowly approached me and whispered, "Excuse me, sir, have you seen my child?" I was caught off guard by her question and stuttered, "Sorry, how old is your child?" She replied, "She is 8 years old and I lost her at this spot a few weeks ago." I said, "Sorry, ma'am, I haven't seen any children, especially during this time of night." She said, "Thank you, I will keep looking," and turned around to slowly walk away. I thought the whole situation was strange, but I shook it off. I looked at her walking away slowly and felt bad at how skinny and hungry she looked. So I took out the $5 change I had in my back pocket and said, "Wait, ma'am, here's $5. Buy yourself a warm coffee or something." She took it, turned back, and walked away. I took a deep breath, turned around, and continued sweeping the street. A few nights later, she appeared again during my shift, her sad eyes scanning the streets. When she saw me, she slowly walked toward me and again asked about her child. I told her I had not seen her child and suggested she call the police for help. I told her I could call for her if she'd like, but she insisted I didn't. I didn't know what else to do, so I shuffled through my pockets to see what I could find. Oddly, I found another $5 bill, although I don't remember putting any change in my back pocket. Without hesitation, I gave it to her and left for my next location. For the following week, my supervisor changed my shift, so I didn't have to work in the location where I saw the homeless woman. Later that week, while browsing online, I found out there had been a car accident on the very same block I was cleaning, where a driver had lost their life, but the passenger had survived. The news brought a scary thought to my head and made me question if the homeless woman I kept seeing was related to that incident. A couple of days later, I was assigned the same spot. While working, I looked around to see if I saw the homeless lady, but to my surprise, I didn't see her that night or any other night after the first two encounters. I continued working at that job for the rest of the year without seeing the homeless woman again. I soon got accepted to college, and I quit the job as it no longer fit my schedule. But that was one weird experience I encountered during my first year in San Francisco that still make me wonder till this day if who I met was truly a living being. Story 3. I've been homeless for about 10 years, living near Venice Beach in LA. My friend who lived in the tent next to mine had a dog named Rufus. We shared food, stories, and most importantly, we protected each other. Every night, my friend and Rufus would sit by the fire until 10 p.m., enjoying the last of the warmth before heading into their tent. One bitterly cold night in December, I was just about to drift off to sleep when I heard Rufus barking frantically. There was a commotion outside like a struggle. My heart pounded in my chest and I jolted awake, adrenaline surging through my veins. As I stumbled out of my tent, I saw a shadowy figure sprinting away into the darkness. My heart sank when I saw my friend lying on the ground, bleeding profusely. He had been stabbed twice, once in the chest and once in the arm. His clothes were bloody, and his feet and hands were muddy from the struggle with the other person around a puddle in the street. My stomach churned, and I felt an overwhelming sense of helplessness. I tried to stop the bleeding with my bare hands, but the gashes were too deep. Without a phone, I dashed into the road and flagged down a car. The driver called 911, and within minutes, police and an ambulance arrived, whisking my friend away. I stayed behind with Rufus, bringing him into my tent for comfort. A few days later, I received the devastating news. My friend had succumbed to his injuries. I was heartbroken, and so was Rufus. Every night after that, Rufus would wait outside until 10 p.m., barking and whining for about 15 minutes before coming into my tent, as if still expecting my friend to return. My friend's tent and belongings eventually got stolen by others around the area. One quiet night, I noticed Rufus moving restlessly outside, but he never came in after 10. The usual city sounds seemed muted, and the air was thick with an eerie silence. I opened my tent flap and saw a dark figure bent over, petting Rufus. The figure's eyes glowed unnaturally in the faint streetlight. Panic set in, and I quickly retreated into my tent, sipping it shut. Rufus's whining grew more desperate, his distress evident. I clutched a small flashlight, its beam flickering weakly, adding to the growing unease. The noises outside became more unsettling, a mix of eerie whispers and footsteps crunching on wet ground. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Hours dragged by, and the sounds eventually faded. Just when I thought it was safe, Rufus scratched at the tent entrance, begging to be let in. I hesitated but eventually unzipped the tent, and he darted inside, trembling, his fur damp from the rain. I lay awake that night, Rufus's restlessness reflecting my own. In the morning, I discovered strange, oversized footprints around my tent. They led away from where my friend's tent used to be, vanishing into the fog. The following nights were filled with tension. Rufus continued his nightly vigil until 10 p.m., barking and whining, but now I felt an unseen presence lurking nearby. One night, his barking stopped abruptly. When I peeked outside, I saw Rufus staring intently at the spot where my friend's tent had been, his body rigid with fear, as if he had seen a ghost. The next morning, with a heavy heart, I packed up my tent and moved a few blocks away, hoping to escape whatever was haunting us.